This is my 2023 Honda Civic Sport Hatchback, K20C2 engine up front, 6-speed manual transmission. So I've owned this car for about 3 months now, and I think it's time to bring you my likes and dislikes video. So this video is going to be all the things I like about this car, and I'm going to follow up with a dislikes video as well. So stay tuned for that on the channel. No particular order really, I'm just going to give you guys my thoughts as I go along here. But let's jump right into it. So the first thing I absolutely love about this car is the exterior styling. I think Honda did a really good job bringing it back to a cleaner, more sleek look on the 11th gen, especially the hatchback. The body lines flow very nice. Being that this is pretty much a base model, and in fact when I bought this car it was the hatchback base model. They recently just brought back the LX trim, but in my opinion spend like the extra $1,000 to get this trim because the wheels alone are worth it. So talking about exterior looks, the overall body lines I love with the car. If you get a hatchback, you get the same grille as the SI, which doesn't have like the drop down pig nose look to it like the lower trim sedans. Anything less than actually anything other than the SI sedan has a very awkward looking nose on the front of it. But the hatchback, all the trims take care of it with this look. I love the fact that even though this doesn't have fog lights, it has a glass cover there that looks like you have the fog lights, so it doesn't look any cheaper of a product. I don't use fog lights, even on cars I've owned with fog lights, so I don't really care that it doesn't have them. Glad it looks the same though. So the wheels, like I said, love the look of the wheel. It's probably one of the nicest wheels Honda's put on a Civic in all of their time. They could have been 17s, but 18s are fine with me. Kept it clean and simple and gave it all one color on the Sport. On the Sport Touring you have machined faces on the front, but I kind of like the all black look to it. Of course you got the really nice center caps. I have additional black lug nuts on here, and it's really nice that they're 8 inches wide and you get 235 width tires from the factory. But taking a look at the side of the car, love the fact that it has a nice looking side skirt that has some nice curvature to it throughout the car here. Yeah, overall I think Honda did a really nice job with the design of this generation. The rear end of the hatch looks really nice. Of course I added the Euro Duckbill OEM Honda spoiler on the rear, paint matched in Sonic Gray, so that looks like it complements the rear of the car very nice with the OEM body lines. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Last thing I'm going to mention about things I like about the exterior, specifically on the Sport model, is the fact that there's no chrome anywhere. I love the body color and then black everywhere to accent everything. Sport Touring and a lot of the sedan trims get this piece in chrome, and it looks fine for a family CRV or something, but on a sporty looking Civic it looks out of place to me. I see a lot of people posting online asking, you know, how much it costs for their Sport Touring to black out their chrome piece with vinyl wrap, and a lot of people are getting that service done. So the fact that you don't have to worry about that and everything looks proper on the Sport trim, I think I'm a huge fan of. So the next thing I absolutely love about this car is the reliability and the simplicity of the drivetrain they still offer here in 2023. You have a port rail injected, so there's no high pressure fuel pump, no cam driven fuel pump. You don't got to worry about any direct injectors failing or intake valves getting gummed up on this car. Everything's very accessible. 6-speed manual transmission feels great still for a modern car, has a lot of feel to it, and just the overall refined nature of this power plant. And if you're expecting a Civic and your goal with buying a Civic is it for straight line speed, I'm sorry, this isn't the car for you. But if you're like me and you have a different car for all the excitement and the track time, and this is just literally nothing more than your daily driver back and forth to work and to haul the family around in, this engine's going to be perfectly fine for you. It's going to last hundreds of thousands of miles without any issues and no maintenance other than oil changes and an occasional valve adjustment every 100,000, and you're good to go. You guys know I'm a fan of working on cars, so all this extra room in the engine bay is something that I really appreciate on this generation. In addition to the power plant itself, I talked about this in my walk around video recently on the channel, but I really like the intake design on the 11th gen. To keep it simple, you have your filter here, and then there's an inlet here that seals to this that gives you a nice cold air intake right from the grill. So from the factory you're getting an extremely cold air intake that would probably give you lower intake air temperatures than any other aftermarket system available for this car. But in addition to the good design of the intake to get fresh cold air to the to the engine, I do enjoy the way it actually sounds. Now, I'm comparing this to my 8th gen R18, which was an LX Sport, so the same exact kind of trim level as this car from 13 years ago. But that car from the factory sounded like a vacuum cleaner, and this does not. This has a nice growl to the intake from like 3,000 to 4,000 RPM. That's very satisfying when you're driving around town and commuting on your daily commute. It's kind of, you know, it doesn't sound like a vacuum cleaner. Like I said, it sounds like it's got some growl to the intake, and makes it enjoyable to shift through the gears. So another thing I like about this car is the fact that you do get a spare tire and full jack and everything underneath, like a typical Civic would from 20, 30 years ago. And the fact that on the hatchback, even though this is pretty much the base model, the Sport, you get the 60/40 split seats. Now that's very nice because I didn't have that in my old car. And the sedans, if you get the LX or the Sport, they don't have a 60/40 split folding rear seat. So it's very handy to have that if you have kids with car seats that take up quite a large area. You need to go get some groceries or go to Home Depot and get a piece of lumber, and you can just fold the 40% of the seat down without having to take both car seats out of the rear seat and like put them inside, because they probably won't both fit in the front seat if you're running errands quick. So love the fact that it has the 60/40 split seats on the hatchback. Another thing design-wise that I really like back here is the fact that you have these tie downs. My old sedan didn't have these, and it made transporting things like my S2000 transmission very difficult, where it would bang around in the trunk if I stopped or accelerated too quick. There was nowhere to strap it down to. But now you have the two hooks in the rear that I can hook little ratchet straps to, and these hooks up here, which you can attach and do like a cross brace over something if you're carrying something large and that can roll around. So love that design element. So let's jump right into the interior here and talk about the things I love on the inside of the car. Transmission, fantastic for a modern day car. The feel, the throw length, and everything for a daily driver is very tight and very smooth when you actuate it. The only thing I will say is they may have used a tiny bit more of a rubbery bushing in this car than the SI or the Type R, because when you hit the end of each gate, it does feel solid, but there feels like there's a little bit of squish and some rubber bushing probably on the end of the shifter cable. So I'm sure that can be corrected with like the hybrid racing shifter cable bushings, which I may do in the future. But from the factory, this thing is like 95% perfect for a manual transmission for a daily driver. I absolutely love rolling through the gears on my way to work, and the throws are very satisfying to use. Gear ratios for this car for a daily are absolutely fantastic. They're 4.1 final drive ratio, but the gearing 1 through 6 is actually the same exact gear set on the Sport, the Sport Touring, and the SI. The Type R has its own different transmission, but the SI gets a different final drive to the differential ring gear, so that makes every gear sit at a little bit taller of an RPM than this car. But you guys seen my POV video of driving this on the highway when I first got it. I really love that in 6th gear on the highway, you're sitting at quite a low RPM, like 70 miles an hour is like 2,600 RPM, and it makes for very low noise. You don't really feel like you're straining the engine and wearing the engine out much, cruising at that low of an RPM on the highway. And it helps improve fuel economy to the upper 30s, where you can get close to 40 miles to the gallon with this 2-liter, even though it is still port injected. You still get very, very good fuel economy. First, I was skeptical about these seats in the Sport. I don't really love the look of them, but you know, the center stripe I could go without. If they were just flat black, I would be totally fine with, but they do look a little narrow up top for the bolstering, so that had me a little concerned. I do like the fact that you can get adjustable headrest still in this car. The SI doesn't get that, so that kind of sucks if you're a taller guy like me to position it where you want. But after owning this car for 3 months now, I will say these seats are pretty dang comfortable for how kind of basic they look. I don't have a problem with them being only manually adjusted with the lever and everything. I have no problems with that. I think that the overall design, I don't really love the fact that it's like a two-tone leather on the outside. I could go without that. But they are pretty soft, and they do, for my build, 6'3", about 210 pounds, they They do hold me very nicely with this bolstering. The car does have more bolstering than my 8th gen Civic LX Sport. It kind of hugs me a little more. But if you're a bigger guy, I don't think that this seat will be big enough for you. I'd say it feels great on me, but I can see it being a problem if you're a little bigger of a guy. So, but overall, in my opinion, even though you're on a very economy-like seat, it's a very, very comfortable daily, and your seating position's great too. The way this is designed, your butt sits really low in the car, like significantly lower than my 8th gen, to where you feel more nested and in a much more sporty driving position than the 8th gen. So overall, the driving feel of this car makes you feel like you're in something sporty. Of course, the interior looks are another thing that I like on this car. They really, really look good. Makes you feel like you're driving a high-end car. Everything you touch is high quality. The leather wrapped steering wheel, this detail on the stitching, even though it's super exposed here, I wonder if that is gonna ever have an issue if you snag like a ring or something on it, or anything sharp on it in your 10 years of ownership, let's say, if that'll be a problem. But so far, the steering wheel feels fantastic. You got the same kind of leather on your shift knob. The only things I think they could have used better materials on is the center armrest here, and then the material here on these side armrests. It's a little bit abrasive on material, and I wish they chose something that was a little more padded and a little more soft there. But overall, interior looks very nice, feels very premium. Another thing I want to touch on that really isn't talked about much online is another like of mine, and you might be surprised to hear that, is I absolutely love the infotainment setup in the Sport. I'm not a huge fan of complicated displays and displays that take a long time to start up when you start the car and open a bunch of apps on a screen that all you do is swipe back and forth on the reviews that I've seen online, and they don't actually do anything. They just show all the icons, and it's no use when you're driving. So you'll see here that this is so simple, and it's not running any kind of complicated software to the point where when you start the car, there's no warning message to hit OK to or anything. It literally just brings up whatever setting you were last on and does it instantaneously here. So let me start the car and you guys can see what I'm talking about for how short of a time it takes to start up. Boom, already done. I love how you have buttons on the bottom here for phone, radio, media, and connect to Apple CarPlay. That's it, it's simple. You can go into the menu here and everything's super fast and super responsive. You don't need anything more than this unless you want to stare at a screen when you drive and be distracted. This media, even though it's a 7-inch display, I'm coming from a car that didn't even have a display, so the fact that it's a 7-inch display doesn't bother me, and the flickering you're seeing on the camera right now is not happening in actuality. That's from my camera. And another thing I'm going to mention here is something I like about this car, was originally going to be in my dislikes video, and that is the sound quality of the stereo. So right when I picked up the car and drove it home, I was very disappointed in the quality of the speakers and the sound and the power it had. So I was gonna list this as a huge dislike, but after owning this car for 3 months and playing with the settings, if you go and test drive a Sport with this infotainment at the dealer and you think the speakers suck, don't be surprised. But if you go into sound settings and you change your bass and treble levels to what I have here, the stereo sounds very, very good. It's clear and the bass hits okay. The only thing I will complain about is the bass doesn't thump in this car like it did in my old Civic LX Sport. It's a 180 watt stereo system here between 8 speakers. You have a tweeter up here and then the top of the rear doors and a full traditional speaker in your doors. So it's kind of the same setup in the front and the rear. And my old car had 160 watts to 4 speakers, so maybe each speaker got a little more power and maybe that's why the bass hit harder. I don't really know, but I will tell you, don't be discouraged with everyone posting online about how the stereo is absolute garbage, because it's not. It does the job, it sounds clear, and if you're not coming from like a full-blown Acura or Bose system and you're coming and you're used to buying cheap commuters, this will do just fine. It's not a bad sounding stereo. Another thing I want to mention about the display here is when you get it, it's like this light gray look. And you can see mine's mostly black. I asked a question to Crazy Honda Chris on YouTube if you could change the color of the interface And he said no, and at first that kind of disappointed me because everything was like this medium tone gray, and I thought it kind of was a little bit of an eyesore when I first picked up the car. But you can go into display adjustment. I have my brightness all the way up. I didn't care about changing the contrast, but this third setting called black level, when you turn that all the way down, you get nice contrast between your blacks and your text. It looks much classier and higher end, but you'll see this is how it kind of comes from for the default. When you turn it up, it kind of just is this gray screen that doesn't look that attractive. So if you turn that all the way down and you just hit back, like I said, the settings menu is super quick and easy to use. It's a much higher end looking display in my opinion. So in addition to the seating position I mentioned, I will say the Sport is really the only trim I could buy besides the Type R. I don't have the money for the Type R, and I wouldn't want to spend the money on the Type R anyway for a daily, running it through the winter. But with that out of the way, this is the only trim you can get with a manual transmission and no sunroof. Sport Touring has a sunroof, so that was out for me. SI has a sunroof, so that was out for me. I don't fit in the cars with a sunroof. I sat in them. You saw my reasons why I didn't buy the SI video. That's pretty much the main reason, is the headroom sucked in that car. So this car, lots of headroom without the sunroof. I at least have 2 inches above my head, which means in theory I could have worn a helmet and fit completely comfortably in this car. Another thing I want to talk about this area is, yes, you do have to hit the on-off button for the idle stop every time you get in the car. But a thing I absolutely love about that is the fact that the icon is not really in your face at all. So you'll see the auto icon appear below the 0 mark on the tachometer there, and they give it just a very small icon that's in white. Thank God. I love that about that, because it blends in with the gauges, and it's not this giant orange icon that screams in your face that you have something disabled on the car. That's how it is on my wife's CR-V. It's a 2021. It's this big orange icon that appears on the dash, and it's kind of an eyesore when you're driving if you want to turn it off every time you drive the car. So I really appreciate that Honda made it blend in on this gauge cluster in this 2023 Civic Sport. Talking about this area even further, in addition to the econ button and the auto start on and off, you have your parking brake, which I don't really care for an electronic parking brake. I'm not going to say that's a like of mine. And brake hold, which I don't really use because you want to roll forward in some situations with a manual. So the fact that the car does not have any drive modes is actually something I like. You know, just give me a basic commuter. Don't give me a bunch of drive modes to choose from. Just make the car how the car is. I don't want to get in the car and change how the car drives. I just want to get in the car and drive. I don't really care for the changing different dynamics of the way it drives. Just give me a car and let it drive the way it drives, and that is how this car is. The only thing you can hit is the econ button, which will delay throttle response even more, but why would you want to do that? So I never turn that on. But you know, overall, there is no drive modes, which I like. So one of the last things I want to talk about that I like, thanks for sticking with me through this long in the video. If you have, guys, give the video a thumbs up and leave me a comment letting me know what you think about my thoughts and if you agree with me or not on all these aspects. Let me know if I missed anything that you guys really like on your 11th gen. So the last thing I want to touch on is the actual tone of the exhaust. Surprisingly, is enjoyable to me. I did not want this car to be, you know, I don't want to have any manual car I drive be absolutely silent, because there's no enjoyment to it really. You want to hear something. Like I mentioned, you can hear an intake growl from like 3,000 to 4,000 RPM, but there's actually a nice tone from the stock exhaust on this car that I did not even expect. When I had my old 8th gen base model R18, like I said, the exhaust and intake sounded like a vacuum cleaner. There was no satisfaction at all with those components on that car. But the exhaust on this car has a nice little tone to it. So I'm gonna give you guys a couple sound clips right now, but overall, when you're cruising around, you're not gonna be able to pick it up on any of my POV videos when I'm driving, just because the GoPro does not have that sound level detection in the microphone. right, so I don't really think the camera did a great job at picking up the actual tone you hear when you drive out the rear of the car or kind of inside the cabin when you drive, but take my word for it that it isn't perfectly silent. It does have a nice deep tone to the exhaust. So if you made it to the end of the video, guys, I appreciate you. Thank you for sticking around. Thanks for watching this video. Give the video a thumbs up like I mentioned. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video, which will be all the things I hate and dislike about my Honda Civic. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one.